Okay, this is John Patney, resident of Canastota, to bring you concerns. This is a tree that used to exist in downtown Canastota. Now you can see the view of downtown Canastota. You can compare this to the view of downtown Canastota with all the beautiful shade trees that can be found on the internet. In the past week, all the trees in downtown Canastota have been cut down, resulting in the greatest negative environmental impact that I have ever seen as a resident of the village of Canastota, in Canastota, for the past 70 some odd years. These trees they shaded the buildings. This 3-story building on the left, on the right, was shaded. There are apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor. The summer sun, or the afternoon sun, beats down on this building in the hot summer months. There's certainly a negative impact of removing these trees on those people that live in those apartments. The appearance of the downtown is completely changed. The visual appearance of downtown is completely changed. This street was once graced by about 18 or 20 large honey locust trees, and this shows you what's left of them. This is part of a project, state-funded, DOT-funded project to replace the sidewalks, reconstruct the sidewalks in downtown Canastota. There was a little bit of heaving, sidewalk heaving caused by roots of a few of the trees, but not all of them, and not very extensive, as you can see here in this case. Root pruning could have solved that problem. Back in sometime last year, project plans were drawn up. Plans, maps, designs, and specifications. The contract was bid to replace a sidewalk and remove 2 of these 18 or so downtown trees. The village paid probably tens of thousands of dollars for the engineer and landscape architect's advice on what to do with these trees. This building here, I think, was built around 1850s, and that tree graced that beautiful building. I accented it. Here's an example of a slight heaving, but then there's a dip in the sidewalk here too. There's several dips, so they're not all problems caused by the tree or the trees. And again, root pruning would have been the solution. It could have been the solution to some of the trees. The plans were drawn. This is quite stark naked here. I haven't seen this in 40 years. The plans were drawn by the architects. Basically, they said 2 trees have to be removed. The one off in the distance, on the right side of the screen, which actually was donated by myself, my brother, and my father at the time. All these trees were paid for by citizens of the community as donations. Well, actually, the trees were paid for by a HUD grant. And the grates, the metal grates on the ground, and the iron protectors, wrought iron upright protectors around each tree trunk were the ones that were donated by the people. $300 a tree. And that was back in the 1960s. Wow. I didn't realize how stark this looks without the trees. After the contract was signed, at first I had heard that all the trees are going to come down in downtown Canastota. So being very upset about that, I looked into it and found out from the village that only 2 trees were going to come down. Maybe because I voiced some opposition, I'm not quite sure. The mayor called me and asked me to come to a meeting where the engineer that was going to oversee the project on site was present, along with New York State DOT people and others, and the landscape architect. And the fellow that's going to oversee the project says, what are we going to do with these trees? We got to take all the dirt from underneath all of them, from all around and underneath them. How are we going to hold the trees up? Didn't sound logical to me. So and the mayor asked me for advice, maybe in retrospect looking for me to say, yeah, I guess you got to take the trees out. Now there's a tree, it was good sized, hardly any sidewalk heaving at all. There's the size of the cone. We'll go out, maybe we'll measure a couple of these in a minute. This fellow's company we received an award from Martha Stewart. And this tree here really wasn't bothering anything or anybody. These were honey locust trees. And they were digging, the water company was digging in the middle of that driveway. You see the patch material? So that's probably 30 feet away from the tree. And in the hole, about 3 feet deep, was a huge 4 or 5 inch root that they had cut off. But just points out how hardy these trees have been and how well they would survive, could have survived. This is the tree, unfortunately, that my father, my brother, and I paid for the grates anyway. And this one, I agreed, did have to come out because it had a girdling root around the bottom. That rotted out, and there was some rot in the tree. So eventually, that tree would have to come down anyway. This tree, alongside the building, was a different project. It was a personal project. Back in the 60s, a friend of mine and I got a tree donated, and we went out and dug with a pickaxe, because it's all crushed stone, and planted that tree. They have said this tree will only be pruned, not removed. There was a tree across the street by the Chinese place. In front of the Chinese place, it was the only tree that had bean pods. My brother planted the trees. His nursery planted the trees back in the 70s. And he told me the nursery sent him the wrong tree. That was not supposed to have bean pods, seed pods. We call them bean pods. So that's a little bit of it. Let me see if I can pause, and we'll get back.